Today we have a big sound card with keys. Now, I'm not much of a musician when it comes to tickling the old ivory or playing the keyboard, much for that matter. However, I came across this synth in a recycling pile at work and I just couldn't pass it up for free. Actually, in that same recycling pile, I got this Apple II, and this Apple as well. You know, I really need to do something with my Apple things at some point. But anyway, I couldn't pass up this synth, and obviously I know it's not a sound card, but it is a MIDI device, and with a bit of adaptering, we should be able to play some games with it, sort of like a sound card or a MIDI module. So let's get to it. Also, know if I sound like a giant nose through any portion of this video, I'm still getting over a cold a little bit, so that's why. So, the synth we have here is a Roland Juno-D Limited Edition, released in 2005. I have to say, for a synth that is 2 decades old, this sleek brushed metal unit still looks modern, in my opinion. As for the sounds it produces, it's very early 2000s, but even so, I don't think Roland has ever made a bad audio device, and this is no exception. In total, there are 706 instrument patches and 47 different effects presets. There's a nice variety of sounds overall, especially considering what I'm used to around here with 90s sound card wavetables. There's some nice punchy percussion, lush strings, a decent piano, and this patch that sounds like the PlayStation 1 intro that makes me happy. The 61 keys also feel okay in my limited knowledge on the subject, and everything is built pretty well for what was, and still is, a budget synth. These days, for most, using something in the box like Contact Player with a MIDI controller would give you more desirable sound options than this. However, we aren't using it for music production. I'll be using it more or less as a glorified MIDI module for playing games. To do this, I'm using this DB15 to MIDI adapter from Sorta shop. This will allow us to use the game port on this S3 Sonic Vibes sound card I reviewed recently to route the general MIDI info to the MIDI input on this Juno-D synth. Then I just have to play a supported game that supports general MIDI, select the right port, and we will have music. Now, normally with general MIDI, there is information located at the beginning of the song that will tell the device what instruments or patches to load. This of course applies here as well with MIDI arrangements made for DOS and early Windows games, but the Juno-D handles GM playback a bit weird. So instead of a standard patch set that plays back MIDI files, you have to put the synth into performance mode and set a playback preset. There are 32 different presets, some of which are genre specific, that will affect the sound of the 16 different instrument banks you can load for the song. There are also 8 free slots to create your own presets as well, but more on that later. There's a bit of a problem here though, as the sound card will send parameter messages to the synth to change instrument banks, which is what it's supposed to do, but most of the time it picks the wrong instruments and won't sound good. In particular, it seemed like switching the pads to the Jazz Scat preset, which made every game sound like Disney's Doug.
I've got balls of steel, and I like patty mayonnaise.
Not ideal, or maybe ideal, depending on how much you like Doug. I was able to work around this issue by turning off the bank selection receive on the Juno-D side and setting the instrument patch banks manually. For each game in the sound tests at the end of this video, I made my own presets this way to get the best results. It's still a bit wonky in terms of MIDI CC messages it is receiving for volume and velocity control, which can lead to some instruments being too loud or too quiet. You definitely can't just plug this in and have it sound amazing like you would a Roland Sound Canvas. You have to mess with it profusely, tweak things, and you can't really expect it to sound good with the factory presets. Just scrolling through the presets, this is the type of sound you can expect. If anyone has more knowledge on how to make these devices communicate more effectively, I would appreciate if you could share it in the comments below. I'm thinking it might just be a limitation of the Juno-D itself in the way it implements GM, but I'm not sure. I'm aware that MPU 401 has a different mapping than GM, and early implementation of MIDI on old Sound Blaster cards is different as well. That shouldn't be the issue here though, right? I'm assuming if I select General MIDI as the driver for the particular game, it should output correctly. That said, I'm no expert on all things MIDI, and I couldn't find any proper information online or anyone doing anything similar to what I have set up here, so please correct me if I'm horribly wrong. With that little disclaimer out of the way, what does it sound like in a few games? I'm gonna give my final thoughts on it at the end of the video, but I'd love to hear what you think of it, just first impressions, because it certainly is quite different than what I normally test. But anyway, let's see what this little early 2000s synth can really do. So, final thoughts. Well, the depth and quality of the instruments on this thing is far beyond FM sound and most old wavetables. With the right settings, it can sound good in my opinion, and is unlike anything I've tested on this channel before. It is rather hard to always get the sound the composer intended due to problems I mentioned earlier, but I still think it's a fun thing to mess with and something worth doing if you have old synths laying around like I did. It also gives me ideas of other interesting things I can do with this Sorta Shop adapter. I'm thinking about using it with a DAW like Reaper with modern plugins, which could sound awesome considering how realistic virtual instruments have become in recent years. If you'd like to see something like that, stay tuned or maybe subscribe and check out my other videos in the meantime. As always, I'd like to thank the generous folks on screen now who support the channel through Patreon or YouTube memberships. On that note, I'm trying to avoid doing sponsorships like I have in the past because I feel there are enough ads on YouTube and it often disrupts the flow of the video. So the support I get in this way helps a lot, and no, I don't take it for granted. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.